Recording. All right, we're live and recording.
All right, awesome. Hey everyone, Izzy here with TrendSpider, and we're going to do a little demo here. I actually am excited because there's so much data on their platform and a lot more to know. I feel like it's almost like trading. What I find out one thing and then I find out something else, and there's always more and more and more, and they're always improving their platform. So I'm excited to even have it demonstrated to me personally. So feel free to chime in and ask questions if you had any, and I'll kind of give a bit of a brief rundown of how I use TrendSpider, but Dan is going to do a demo for us here on a lot of different features and kind of let him take over that part.
All right, very cool. Thanks, Izzy. My name is Dan Ushman. I'm one of the founders of TrendSpider. I've been trading since 2008, which was a crazy time to start. Thank you all for being here today. I hope you find this demonstration of the product to be helpful. I'll just start off by just saying, like, we build the software primarily initially for ourselves, right? Like, we wanted to build something that brought technology that isn't available to retail traders, or it wasn't available, and make it available. I'm in the Chicago area. I have a lot of friends who work at some of the prop shops and market makers and hedge funds here, right? And it always blew my mind as a trader, the difference, right? Like, they had tools and capabilities that us retail people couldn't even dream of, right? First looked for products that could do this already out the box, discovered that there hadn't been any real innovation in the retail trade tech world in more than a decade, right? When TradingView first came out with their very first version, it was one of the first innovative looks that any technology company has taken for retail investors, right? And to do so in a very honest way, right? And to basically provide tools, right, that you can use and deploy in any strategy that you trade, so that they're flexible and useful, right, for as many investors as we could be. So that's kind of how this platform was born. We got our bread and butter from automated analysis, right? So these are features like auto trend lines, where the system can automatically look at a chart and identify trend lines. And I'll take a moment talking about each of these, right? But auto trends was our very first feature, so I always like to start demos with it. And it's really cool because it works in a way that is fundamentally different than how anything else works, right? And you can see what that looks like here when I remove the filters, right, from the trend lines that the system has detected. And you can see it can find up to 2,000 lines per chart, right? And it does this in a way that is customizable by the user. So I won't get into it here because it can be a whole hour on its own, but you can tell it how to do this, right? And it doesn't have to work in this specific way, but you have the ability to have the system look at a chart for you, connect every possible high to every other possible high, every low to every other low, do so in a rule-based methodology so that it is doing it the exact same way every time, and filter them down for you based on math, right? So it will actually count how many times every trend line it detects, all 2,000, are touched by a price, how often price bounces off it, how long the line is, its slope, how oftentimes price has gone through it. We call it violations, right? And this can all be used to tell the system how to analyze a chart, right? You can have it filter and detect lines in a million different ways. A lot of people get confused when they first play with auto trends because it seems like it's like, okay, there's just automated trend line detection. They don't realize just how customizable it is, but it is extremely customizable and flexible, and it's designed to save people time. And in my trading, I use this primarily to look at what I might have missed, right? Because I like to do my own analysis, and a lot of traders do, right? So I draw my own lines on a chart, I measure my own fibs, right? But before I'm done, I always flip auto trends on, I always flip auto fibs on just to see if I missed something, right? And you can see this is the automated fib retracement that it picks up, and that just happens with the click of a button, which is really cool and handy, especially if you're moving through charts very quickly. Another really cool thing about what you can do with trend lines in TrendSpider, and this isn't just trend lines, right? It's anything, but it can be a line that you draw yourself, like this yellow one I just drew. It can be a line the system picks up, but you can right-click on those lines and create an alert, right? An alert is designed in TrendSpider to mimic how you would watch a chart, right? So if you're, if you're somebody who thinks of levels as more of a fuzzy zone like I do, right? Like I don't think of a trend line as precise, right? It's more of a guardrail. Price may pop close to it and pull back from it, or it may go through it and then pull back through it, right? There's a lot of things that can happen. You can have the system watch the chart that way, your way, right? And you do this by telling it what to look for, right? So here we'll look for a bounce, right? And you can tell it how close to get, right? This is a $900 stock amount, so you can go into dollars, but it's dynamically set. And here I'll get an alert if this flag starts to break out again and pull into this area, right? It's like a proximity alarm. And you have a lot of flexibility here, right? So you can also trigger this alert off a lower time frame, which means that this is a daily trend line. But I can have the system watch the 10-minute chart and let me know when a 10-minute candle bounces off this kind of buffer zone here, right? And that's very cool when you're trying to trade and analyze stocks and opportunities and positions at scale, right? Like when you have a lot of positions open or you're watching a lot of stocks, you can just create alerts and have the system watch them for a month or 2 months, right? And let you know when something you care about actually happens. That's a really cool thing because you can use auto trends to identify lines. You can use TrendSpider alerts to then monitor those lines. And you can also do it on lines that you draw yourself, right? So you might say, I'm also interested if it happens to pull back down here, right? And you can create another alert down there that will watch that level for you as well. And keep in mind, this is only just a couple different types of alerts, right? The platform supports alerts that use multiple factors. So you can use lower indicators combined with price action and all kinds of other things. We call that a multi-factor alert. You can get to that here. I probably won't spend a lot of time on that right now just because I want to be respectful of everyone's day. And if I did that, it would take all night. But it's very powerful. And you can use any of the automated features in TrendSpider and any of the capabilities across the entire platform. I see people are raising their hands. I will and asking questions in the QA. We will get to questions just at the end. I don't want to get too distracted with a question and miss something interesting to show you. So if you can, pop them into questions tab, and I will go through that once we wrap up kind of a demo here for you guys. Another really cool thing about alerts is they can work on indicators. Right, so these are acceleration bands, not something a lot of people use, right? But you do have price outside of them right now. You may be interested to know when price gets back in them, right? So you can just create a breakthrough alert on the acceleration band itself, and you can set the buffer zone to 0, and you can get alerted when price re-enters this zone here.
Clutter in here. If you could maybe boot this person out. I don't have
Sorry?
that. There's some clutter in that chat. If you could maybe boot the person out. I can't seem to.
Oh, in the chat. I don't even know how to get to the chat.
Okay, you need to stop that, please.
Oh, hold on, I got it. Who is this person? Sam Jam, okay. Okay. The guy spamming the chat is now gone. Sorry about that. I don't know why anybody would want to do that. That's rude. So anyways, that's how you can use alerts on trend lines and indicators. They work the same on horizontal levels, fib levels, basically anything you can dream up. It's pretty powerful. I'm a huge fan of them because I have a lot of positions open, right? I tend to trade, I have probably 30 positions right now. It's impossible for me to watch them all throughout the day, especially when I'm on the phone half the day, right, and in meetings. So I use alerts to just basically say, hey, TrendSpider, watch this for me and let me know if something I truly care about happens, right? And I use them for both entries and exits, both stops and profit targets, right? And it's a really handy way to kind of keep your eyes on the ball without actually having to do it yourself, right? Because I think a lot of traders think it's super cool to have like 30 monitors. I have 5, right? I'm not as cool as some of the guys out there. But what's been really interesting is since we rolled out alerts, I only have charts on one of them, right? And I used to have walls of charts, in front of me, and I'd be trying to watch, like what a stock I'm trading is doing while scoping an entry, and I would always miss something, you know, and miss opportunities and things like that. So, you know, I just think that that's a really cool use case that, you know, if you guys are interested, you can definitely play with. Some other stuff here. Obviously, we have all the indicators you could probably ever want. We add them at a clip about 20 or so a month, or we're about to get back to that cadence in the next week or so. So we're always adding indicators, and if there's one that you need that's not here, there's a handy request button, and we actually do read those requests, and they do affect our roadmap. You know, we're very much driven by our users, and you know, we're really big on actually doing things that people ask us to do. There's also automated pattern recognition, which is really cool, right? And I'm going to show you a few things about this, right? First is let's look for hammers on this chart, and you can see the system will automatically highlight them for me. This is a feature that you can use in the scanners, the backtesters, and multi-factor alerts, as well as on your charts. But it also supports multi-time frames. And that's not something I've covered yet, but multi-time frame analysis covers a lot of the system. So when I turn it on by clicking MTFA in the toolbar here, it adds a second time frame to my chart. And if I want to see on my daily chart where a monthly or a weekly hammer might be, I can actually see what the candles that make up that hammer look like. For example, right here, right, this is a hammer on the weekly chart, right? And I can actually see the candles that make that up on the inside. And multi-time frame analysis doesn't just work in pattern recognition. There's over, I believe, 200 total patterns in the system that you can have the system detect for you, right? But it doesn't just work here. It also works on automated trend lines, right? It works on indicators. It works on just about anything that the system can do for you. And what you're looking at here is that same chart that we've been hanging out on, ISRG here, right? But now you have the daily automated trend lines, and you have the weekly trends that the system's picking up for you as well. And by the way, I forgot to mention, but if you don't like an automated trend line, you can just get rid of it. Hold Shift and click on it, and it disappears. And the same thing goes if you're playing around in the unfiltered view. If you double click on a line, it'll lock it in place. So when you reapply the filter or turn auto trends off, you'll still be able to, you'll still be able to see that line that you selected. So those are some really fun features. I'm a big fan of using them, especially as a way to kind of second guess and double check my own analysis. There's a lot of other stuff in TrendSpider, so I'm going to kind of slowly move through them. The one I just turned on here is called our heat maps. And these are price action driven heat maps. And you can see what it looks like when it detects it on your chart. And what this is doing is it's taking every possible trend line, right, that is formed by the price action on the time frame that you're on and the two that sandwich it. So I'm on daily, so it's going to be the 4-hour time frame and the weekly time frame. And it's using those to identify what area has the least amount of trend line resistance in it across all those time frames. And this tends to be fairly predictive of a path that a stock will possibly take as it moves forward, right? I don't want to pretend it's perfect because it's not, right? But when you take this cumulative sum of all the trend lines, you put them over a grid, you color grid boxes where more lines cross in a darker red, you end up with these dark zones, right? And it does kind of imply that the path of least resistance for ISRG, at least for the time being, is to move horizontally after this nice pop that it's had here, right? And it implies there's support in the low 800s, there's resistance around 900, right? And down in this darker area, there's really nothing standing in the way of price as far as trend lines go. There's other types of heat maps in TrendSpider too, right? So we have one that's very popular that is called horizontal. Horizontal attempts to abstract support and resistance levels that are horizontal. You have to forgive me, heat maps sometimes take a little bit of time to load. There's a lot of computing power that goes into them because they look for consolidation areas where there's a lot of highs from green candles or lows on red candles. But you can kind of see what this looks like. It's suggesting that if price pulls back, right, sharply, you will probably have support in the mid 700s on this name. And this will work on any time period. So, if you want to switch down to 65-minute, or some other time period, right, the system's going to do the exact same calculation, right? And there's also, some other types of heat maps here that I'm not going to really go into because I don't think they're all that exciting compared to those two. But those two are my favorites. I do use them fairly often. The next thing you're going to see in the top toolbar here is events. Events is really cool. Behind events is, I think someone asked about this in the chat too, but behind events is analyst estimates, splits, dividends, and earnings data, right? And we're very close to adding a few other things to this, including news events. So you can actually utilize news on your chart. And I'm going to just start with analysts because I think it is the coolest thing, right? I'm going to start on Tesla because I think it's a really interesting stock to do this example on, right? So when I have analyst ratings enabled in my events menu here, and the analyst estimates box shows up on the chart key on the left of my chart here, it will put these analyst boxes at the bottom. They look like volume bars, right? And it's fascinating when you start to look at this and understand this data, because you can then pick and choose which analysts are full of it and which ones are actually worth listening to and which ones are really worth doing the exact opposite of whatever they recommend. And that's the example I'll show you on Tesla because it's one of my favorites. So if you look at the left side here, right, this analyst estimate toolbar has a list of every analyst, what they say about a stock, and a grid that gives you a visual representation of how many are bullish, how many are neutral, how many are bearish, right? At the bottom, you have the exact same info. So when I move my mouse over these analysts, it actually highlights the box at the bottom of my chart that represents that analyst, right? So you can kind of see when they made their recommendations. And what I like to do here is I like to look for a major bottom, right? For Tesla, that would be May of 2019, I think was its one of its all-time lows. And let's say, who said to sell at the bottom? Well, Citigroup said to sell. So then I go on this left side menu again and I click on Citigroup and I click on the three dots next to analysts and I go down to only favorites. And now I can see just Citigroup's ratings, right? And you can see that, you know, the last bunch of times Citigroup has said anything about Tesla, it's been a really bad call. I mean, they said sell here and you had a 200% rally. They said sell here, right? And you had, you know, even if you just count this move alone, right, you had a 300% rally and a total of 900%, right? And this keeps happening over and over. Every time Citi says sell in Tesla, right, it goes up. That's interesting to me, right? Because I'm a technical trader and I look for correlations, right? And that correlation can be volume or MACD, but it can also be, you know, outside things, right? And this is one of the more interesting use cases in TrendSpider, right? No other platform I'm aware of takes analyst recommendation data and makes it consumable like a technical indicator. And you can do other stuff here too. Like when you have it set to favorites, you can just click on people, right? Like I happen to know that, I think they're called Piper Sandler or something. Yeah, Piper Sandler tends to be right about Tesla, right? Every time Piper has said buy, right, in the long run at least, Tesla has gone up, you know? So you can then say, okay, what happens when Piper says buy, Citigroup says sell? Well, this just happened to mark this bottom during COVID last year. And it was the very bottom, and you had a 900% rally there, right? So this exposes signals that most people never think about. And it uses analyst recommendations that most traders just ignore because they're so unreliable and gives you a way to make sense of it. Hopefully you can see why that's one of my favorite features. It's also relatively new. We just added that a few months ago. And you know, it's one of the most popular sidebar widgets, right? People seem to really like it. Next thing in the same vein, or a similar vein that I'll show you is, I'm gonna flip this off for a second, is our insider trading widget on the right here, right? And I think this is really interesting because if you look at a name like Facebook, right, this gives you a way to see directly from the SEC filings that insiders and large owners of companies have to file, right? This lets you see what they're doing. And on Facebook, I like to zero in on Zuckerberg, right? Because he's Zuckerberg, right? So you select his name from this drop-down menu at the top, and you can see that Zuck, for whatever reason, has been dumping $20 million of Facebook shares every single day, right? This has been relentless, and it started when Facebook was priced a little less. He was selling like 10 million a day, but it started in November, and you can see his ownership chart here, right? He's just been disposing of shares every day forever, right? And it's interesting when you juxtapose this with what analysts are saying about Facebook, because every single analyst on the street except Wedbush here is bullish as hell about Facebook. And it makes me pause for a second when I look at this, right? I'm like, wait a second, every single Wall Street bank is telling me to buy this thing left and right. It's been going up, that is true. But the owners and the 10% owners and the directors of the company are dumping their shares. And they're not doing it slowly, right? Like Zuck can go for a long time selling 20 million bucks a day, but that's sizable, right? He's selling like 300,000 shares in each one of these blocks. And it's not like anybody else who works at Facebook is buying, right? Like you scroll through this list and it's either people getting shares for free or dumping them on the market. So, you know, I find that to be interesting because when you look at another company like Google or Alphabet, right, and you look at its founder, right, Sergey Brin or Larry Page, let's see, yeah, there's Sergey Brin. He hasn't sold a single share, right? You know, he's holding his shares and he's got, you know, a lot of them. He's got 19.2 million of them, right? And this, again, is just data that, you know, most traders probably never think about, right? It's not necessarily data you can directly trade off of, but it's very interesting and may give you reasons to pause or reasons to get excited, right? Like if you see the CEO and management of a company buying shares, right? There's only one reason you would buy shares, right? It's because you think they're going to get more valuable. There's a million reasons why you might sell them. So, you know, I always like to highlight that because it's new.
Sorry, Dan, I don't mean to interrupt you. I do the same thing. And I actually was talking about Walmart in my pre-market stream this morning. A lot of people in my Discord were really interested in that one, but I noticed that I think the CEO was selling. So I've been curious, you know, why is he selling into a gap, right? And they have earnings coming up, I think, in 10 days. So yeah, it just kind of, I look at those things too. Makes me really
Very
wonder.
smart. And by the way, it's really cool. I didn't show you guys this, but if you put your mouse over these buys and sells, these insider transactions, and click read, it takes you directly to the SEC filing. Right. We actually get this data with an AI bot that reads the filings and then structures the data in a way that is just, you know, we can store in a database. So it's direct from the source and it's pretty real time. Right. There's a delay in how quickly they have to report their buys. I think they get like 3 days or a week or something like that. But the minute it hits Edgar, which is the SEC's database, it hits TrendSpider as well. So another feature that's kind of not technical, but kind of is technical that I just want to highlight here is seasonality. Do you ever use this, Izzy? Like the concept of seasonality?
I've never used it in TrendSpider, but yes, 100%. I'm a huge seasonal trader. That's how I started off trading, was seasonality and different trends. Before I actually even learned TA, I was trading off of seasonality. And I think that's mostly because I began trading more of commodity stocks, so gold and crude, and those have their seasons. So that's kind of where I started that whole trend of trading things based off their seasons. So this is an awesome feature. I'm so excited right now.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite features, right? And it's really flexible. Like, you know, our whole thing is give people the data, right? Let the data set them free, right? So you can control when it measures from. You can say, I want to know the seasonality of Disney, but I only want to know it since, I don't know, 2011, right? Or 2012, right? Something like that, right? And it gets really interesting when you start to look at more recent data. But then you can also, let's say you're looking at a long period of time, you can also filter out the really weird times. Like you might want to remove 2008, 2020, 2012, right? You just type them and it removes them from the data, right? So you can get a filtered seasonality profile for any asset. And when you turn the filters off, it just removes the filters. So you can quickly flip it on and just kind of eyeball the differences, right? It also allows you to slice and dice the data a variety of different ways. So you can do monthly seasonality, which is what most people are used to, maybe even quarterly, but you can do weekly here, right? You can do daily if you're a day trader, and you can do hour of the day if you're a scalper, right? And it's really fascinating when you say, okay, what hour of the day has been the best day to own Disney this year since January 1st? Well, it's the middle of the day, right? 53% of the time, at 12:30 hour, Disney closes higher, right? And you can do this in a variety of different ways. And what I find really interesting about it is you end up finding some really cool gems sometimes. Like on Disney, for example, the last 9, it's also true for the last 10 years, the 28th week of the year, it has never lost money in the last 10 years, right? It's gone up or stayed flat 100% of the time. And furthermore, right, it has a really rough patch just a few weeks earlier. So if you're a swing trader, it seems to reason that maybe you buy at the end of the 24th week, which is weak, and then you ride it for the next 3 or 4 weeks, which tend to be better, right? And this actually played out this year pretty nicely, but in the beginning of the year, right? You know, like the second and third week of the year, not great for Disney. The third week usually is, right? So it kind of gives you a sense for how a stock moves throughout time, right? And it's not just win rate, right? This key along the bottom here is clickable. So I can click on raw data here, flip win rate off, and I can say, okay, during the 28th week, what was the distribution of outcomes, right? Well, there was one where it barely squeaked by 0.6%, 0.31%, 1.2, 1.7, and a few outliers that really made you know, its year that year or whatever that is month, right? And you can kind of see, you know, like how does this play out volatility wise? And you can see volatility by either using the raw data or by using the min, max, and change thing, because this gives you the same data, but in a way that makes seeing volatility pretty easy, right? And there's a whole bunch of different things you can do in here. And when you're open in the seasonality tool, you don't have to close it to switch symbols. Like if you have full screen, you just type the name of the next symbol, right? And it will pull up the search bar and give you a way to search for it. And wow, I mean, Johnson & Johnson last 9 years, like you do not want to buy at the end of the 38th week because it's probably going to crash the 39th week, right? That just seems to be what happens.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Can you combine the seasonality with earnings in there, like within the same graph, or to kind of get like an idea of like when they reported, or you just can do them side by side, like separate, where
you'd have to do them separately right now. You can't combine them. That's a great idea, though. I'm going to add that to my little list of ideas here. Earnings and seasonality.
Because that's part of my strategy with the seasonality of trading. I tend to factor in the earnings dates in there too, and just do a cross comparison to how things trade right before earnings or post earnings. And it's always
definitely. I love that concept. We'll look at adding something to make that easier. Okay. So last thing in the sidebar that I'll just touch on, right? We also bring in the paid premium Benzinga Pro newsfeed. So we have a site license to it that we license from them. They also provide our analyst data. So that actually comes from Benzinga as well, right? But you have that news available to you if you're interested in that kind of thing. And we're going to be making insider transactions and the news events something that you can put on your charts in the event menu pretty soon. Right now, it's a little bit limited. You can put earnings, you can put splits, dividends, and things like that. And while I'm talking about splits and dividends, right, I just want to highlight just how robust this is, right? Because a lot of systems will tell you when there's a dividend, right, or when there's a split. But they don't really factor that there's different dates involved in dividends and splits, right? And Apple's a fascinating example. I was showing this off the other day. But if you look at the time in between when Apple split, is that split or is that dividend? Hold on. Let me turn dividends off.
That's so funny that you're saying this, because I was analyzing the Apple split yesterday from 2014.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Their split not long ago was announced here, right, on June 30th, and it didn't close until the end of August. And in that time, you had a 40% rally.
Yep.
Right,
which is exactly what I charted yesterday.
Fascinating. Great minds, right? What I just want to highlight is this is very robust, right? So you can control what it displays, right? It can display the change. When it comes to dividends, you can see the declaration date, the recording date, and the ex-dividend date, right? You can see them separately or individually. And the same thing goes for splits, right? You can control which ones, which dates to show. You can control the position, and you can even automatically draw the vertical line if you choose to, right, on it. So we try to make it easy, right, to use, not just make it available, but make it actually useful.
That's actually really helpful. I did not know that, because part of my option strategy is targeting those higher delta plays around their ex-dividend, like right before their ex-dividend dates. They usually have a run up, and then post ex-dividend, I did that with Coke, Mo, Pepsi. They'll get that nice sell off, but it's a good way of kind of having an idea, because I've done it before where I've completely forgotten about the dividend date, and then I was stuck in a trade, and then their ex-dividend comes out and the stock pulls back. But it's a really great strategy to combine with your options trading.
Definitely. Oh, excuse me, I just choked.
And are you okay?
Sorry, I took a sip of my drink and it went down the wrong hole. Embarrassing. Apologies.
I do
Okay,
that
so
daily, like 10 times a day, so don't worry.
yeah, it happens to me more than it probably should. I sometimes wonder if I'm still a 2-year-old.
So that's under
Um,
indicators where you have that, right, Dan?
the dividends and splits. No, it's under events,
Events,
right?
okay.
Yeah, so it's a three. You can turn events on and off in mass, and then the 3 dots next to events expands the menu.
Awesome.
It's an
I
interface motif that you can kind of just keep in mind as you use the platform. Anytime you see 3 dots, you can click on them,
Yeah,
right? You can click on other things, but usually there's a menu hidden behind that, right? Which will give you some options and some flexibility. So moving on to some more technical stuff, right? I'll touch on raindrop charts in just a minute. I love raindrops, and I think everybody should love raindrops. But I do want to just highlight, we have some relative strength tools built in, right? So you can make this bottom chart, it's called a compare price indicator, show another asset, right? This is SPY versus Apple, right? You can put indexes here like the VIX or the TNX. TNX has been one I've been watching a lot. And you can actually use candles, bars, raindrops, whatever type of chart you want. So this is Apple with the 10-year Treasury candles underneath it. Gives me a quick way to compare any indicator to any other indicator. And this also gives you the ability to have the same symbol by leaving the symbol box blank and a different chart type, right? So you can have, a candlestick chart with raindrops at the bottom, right? This is actually what I do a lot because I look for raindrop divergence. And I'm going to get into raindrops in just a second here. There's another thing you can do with lower indicators that's pretty unique to TrendSpider, right? So like I can add, this is called Ultimate RSI. It's an RSI derivative that I like to use a lot. I can change this so that it's not the RSI of the symbol I'm watching, but the RSI of the SPY, right? This is SPY's RSI, but this is Apple's chart, right? And sometimes that gives you some interesting, tidbits, right? It's just a layer of flexibility in TrendSpider that other platforms don't offer. But you can put a different symbol to any lower indicator. You can have 2 RSIs. One is SPY's RSI, one is Apple's RSI, and SPY's will stay the same, and Apple's will change as you flip through symbols. And that's a really unique capability, right? And we added it as an experiment, right? We're not sure exactly how useful that is for trading, but I just think it's helpful to show that it's possible, right? That level of flexibility does exist. There's also a number of indicators we consider specialty indicators. Ultimate RSI is one of them. You really can't find this anywhere else. It's a really powerful RSI plus Bollinger Band kind of mashup indicator. I know some people have built their own. But we also have some very cool twists on common things, right? And volume by price is one of my absolute favorites, right? I use this every day, right? And I'm a big believer that volume will lead the way, right? It's one of the main reasons I'm kind of bearish on Bitcoin right now, right? Because if you look at the Bitcoin chart, there's this giant volume shelf right here, right? And that will provide selling pressure. And what's cool about TrendSpider is you can control where this is measured from by just moving this line around your screen. You want to measure the volume profile on the way down? Stick it at the top, right? You can kind of see there's a lot of people buying Bitcoin right up here. All right, probably not good for my short GBTC position, but hey. And it's really cool that you can do that, and you can move it around and plop it anywhere that you want. And we give you other ways to anchor this as well. So you may say, okay, that's great. I don't want to move it around all the time, Dan, though. So you can have the system automatically anchor it for you. You can say, always anchor the volume profile to the first day of the year, right? Now, as I flip through charts, it's just going to put this on the first. And there's a lot of optionality into how you do that, right? So instead of the first day of the year, you can say, anchor it to the day with the highest volume in a range of 150 candles, right? And you'll see that, oops, 150 is too far out there. You have to have double the number of candles you put in there on your chart for it to work. So this is the highest volume day in the last 100 candles. It's ignoring the most recent price action because it tries not to anchor it too close, right? And this is the next highest day, and it automatically plops it there, right? And you can again see what I worry about here, right? With Bitcoin, what makes me bearish is there's just so much volume up here. These people will likely want to get out and break even if price gets back up there. That will create selling pressure down, right? And we'll possibly book in a lower high, which would confirm the kind of bearish sentiment for this cryptocurrency. You can also auto anchor other things and manually anchor other things. So if you want to anchor a volume weighted average price, this is something that Brian Shannon talks about a lot. He's definitely somebody I really look up to as a trader, right? You just right click on the candle and it will anchor a volume weighted average price from that point. And because it's a cumulative indicator, right, the volume builds over time from the anchor point. It gives you the ability to see where that VWAP level would be from an inflection point, from a point of time that actually mattered, right? And you can see that if you measure it from the Bitcoin's all-time high back on the 13th here, price has not yet overcome it, right? It's running up into it. You also have this volume shelf here. And you can keep anchoring these at different places. There's different techniques to do it. But it's really, really fun, right? Because it'll give you levels that you never thought existed. And honestly, like this is one of the just a handful of indicators I personally use anymore, right? I don't really use many indicators, but this one has proven itself to me over a long time. I remember when I saw Brian present this at Chart Summit. It was like 2 or 3 years ago in Colorado, and I had to stop him as he was walking off the stage and beg him to let us put it in to the TrendSpider platform, right? And I'm really grateful he agreed because he's really onto something with this. And what's really cool about anchored VWAPs also is you can auto anchor these as well, right? So you can say, you know what, I want to anchor this VWAP, I don't know, quarter to date, right? And it will automatically plop it there and give you a label so you know why it's there, right? And that flexibility will carry over to any charts you look at, right? Anytime you pull up another chart, it'll have a VWAP anchored quarter to date now for me here, right? And you can just look at shop and there you go, right? So VWAP anchoring, volume by price tools. We're really well known for our volume capabilities. We put a lot of effort and time and frankly money into building good volume tools. The data to generate this stuff is by no means even remotely close to cheap. And one of the other things we do with volume that is completely unique to TrendSpider, we actually have a patent application out on this capability, is something called raindrop charts. And raindrops, I'm sure you've heard the term before, especially if you've been on the TrendSpider Twitter feed, right? But raindrops are a completely new type of price bar that were developed by our CTO, Ruslan, or Russ as we call him. Russ has spent his entire career in the charting world. He was like employee number 4 at TradingView. He worked at eSignal. He's worked on a bunch. He worked at Trading Sim, which is a big simulator. He spent his entire career building charting stuff. And I remember the day when he called me up, he's like, hey, I had the craziest idea in the shower today, right? And it's this thing I'm calling a raindrop, right? I'm going to make a prototype and you better look at it, right? So he came up with this, and it's absolutely one of the more interesting and powerful tools. We don't pretend to be total experts in it. It is brand new. If you go to trendspider.com/raindrops, you can read the white paper on it. We put out a 13-page white paper that explains exactly what these are, exactly how they're built, right? So you know exactly what you're looking at, so you can learn and try to understand how they work. And what I'll do here is I'll give you a brief explanation of them, so you have some foundational knowledge, right? And I'm going to do this first with just raindrops, and then I can maybe show you some comparisons, against candles versus raindrops. So a raindrop is, we'll start with this one right here, the one for Tuesday for today, is a price bar, right? Like a candle, it represents the high and low range of a trading day session, right? So shop traded between 1166 and about 1134 today, right? That is the same as a candle. There's no difference in the high and the low, but that is also the only similarity. They do not have open and close prices. You will see, and I'll make them a little bolder just to make it easier to see, right? But you can see that each raindrop has a dash on either side. That is not an open, it's not a close, right? That is the volume weighted average price for the first and second half of the trading period. So a US trading session on Shop is 6, and any other US equity is 6.5 hours long. That means the left side of each raindrop represents the first 3.25 hours of the day, and the right side represents the second 3.25 hours of the day. Right? You can think of them kind of like a fuzzy open or close, but really they're volume weighted average prices. The dot in the middle is the VWAP for the entire day. And the blob is the profile of the volume distribution, right? It is that volume profile, but for just half of a period, flipped on its side and turned into an area chart on the side of each raindrop. And this gives you some idea as to, you know, if a move is real or not, right? And I'll show you how you do that in a moment here. It also gives you a really interesting way to identify a point in time when the market is really, really confused. On Chop, for example, that would be right here on March 26th of this year. This is blue. It's not red, right? The right VWAP is not lower than the left one. The left one's not higher than the right one, right? They're actually at the same level, more or less. When you see blue raindrops, it means all day, no matter how much volume traded on a volume weighted average basis, everybody paid the same price for that asset. How often does that happen? Statistically, it only happens less than 4% of the time, right? And it tends to happen when price is about to do something volatile next, right? They're not on their own directional, right? A blue raindrop doesn't mean it's going to go up or down, right? It doesn't mean it's going to reverse, right? But it does mean that there's going to be volatility coming because the market is truly indecisive. It's kind of like a doji, right? We call it a super doji sometimes, you know, when we're joking around about them. But you can see how the blue raindrop here marked the short-term bottom, right? Like, you know, price bounced pretty hard from here. This was, what is this move, right? It's a 25% to almost 3-week move, right? And you can see other times that you've seen a blue raindrop, you've seen similar periods of volatility, right? Might be volatility up, might be volatility down, right? But usually something happens after there's a blue raindrop. And very often, not always, but very often, you see them forming at major highs and major lows. Tesla is a great example here, right? You can look at the very top of Tesla and you've got a blue raindrop right here, literally top ticking the thing, right? You can look at the bottom here and you've got blue raindrops clustering, right? You have multiple blue raindrops at the bottom here in a cluster type of formation, right? And you can keep going back and you'll see this happening over and over in just about any stock. Any asset really. When you see blue, you should pay attention, right? And this is why, while I primarily use candles myself when I'm charting, this is why I always keep the compare indicator on at the bottom of my chart, right? Because this gives me a way to see candles, which I prefer to chart off, you know, I won't lie, right? But it also gives me the ability to quickly glance down and say, is that a raindrop a different color than the candle? When you have a raindrop that's green and a candle that's red, that's something to pay attention to. The raindrop usually tends to win, right? Not always, right? I don't want to say always, but the raindrop tends to be a more accurate representation because it takes volume into account. And we firmly believe volume is just about everything when it comes to trading. Like if there's no liquidity, there's no trading. Another really cool thing you can do with raindrops, besides looking for divergence, besides looking for blue raindrops, is look at breakouts and see if they're a real breakout or not, right? You know, and it's sometimes a little tricky to find an example. Here's an example of divergence, by the way. J&J's candle today was red. Its raindrop was green. If you zoom in, you can see it's almost blue, right? It's super close. The two VWAPs are really close to each other. You know, I wouldn't be surprised, given that there's a volume shelf here, if we have a pop tomorrow on J&J for that reason. You can also see up here, right? You have what looks like a bullish inside day, right? Kind of a doji forming, but on the raindrop chart, you have a blue raindrop. Right here, you have a red candle, looks really bearish, but you have a blue raindrop, right? And you ended up having the next day being a turnaround day and a 5% pop. So looking for differences between raindrops and candles is really useful. You can also, let me turn this off and switch back to a full raindrop chart. Izzy, what's a stock that recently broke out? Or might be breaking out today?
Oh, 100% the stocks that we've been playing. We played MVIS yesterday. That thing went parobic, and I played BTX today, and the last week or two, both have been in a complete uptrend.
Let's look at those. Oh wow, look at that guy! Look at this blue doji at the very bottom here.
Yep,
that's absolutely hilarious. You know, it's and you see this actually happen a fair amount in this name. This was blue before the last big pop too, and there was a little blue before the next pop. So I'm trying to find one that's like might be breaking out right now or might be getting close to.
Well, what about NVAX? That we did play that one today, and I've been long that one for just over 2 weeks now. I don't know if that's
Yep. So it's a great example. This is basically what I was looking for. When you have a breakout like what you had on Monday here, right? You know, I don't know what the candle looks like for this, right? It looks like a pretty bullish candle. Sometimes you'll see the wick pop above and the candle body will actually close below, right? When you see that, and when you look at the raindrop chart, if you see something different there, like what you see here, this is called balloon shape. I mean, literally the raindrop kind of looks like a balloon, right? There's like a long stem with not a lot of volume on it and then a big chunk. That tells you that it's most likely a real breakout, right? If you see the opposite, right, like you see, a big green candle and you flip to the raindrop and you see on the raindrop, both VWAPs are below your breakout level, that's probably going to pull back the next day, right? It's a great way to tell a real breakout from a fake breakout, right? If you look at where the volume was dispersed during that period of time, right, relative to the candle. If a candle looks really bullish, but there's no volume up there, it's a bull trap more often than it's not, right? It's going to pop back really hard and trap a bunch of traders who thought they were buying a nice breakout, right? And oftentimes you see fake breakouts that actually are real, right? On a candle, it looks like a giant wick at the top. But on the raindrop chart, right, you can clearly see that, the volume held above, right, your level that you cared about, right? And you can see this is beautiful because you have this nice continuation here, right? So hopefully that's helpful. I could probably talk for another hour, but I know we're at about like 40 minutes here, so I want to leave some time for questions in case anybody has any. And Izzy, if you want me to cover anything I missed or that you think would be useful, let me know.
Oh, so far it's been great. I guess I have like a slight question with this raindrop. On the like that bubble, or I guess your balloon, it doesn't matter if it's leaning left or right. I just wasn't really sure on that. Like you
Yeah,
see,
so great question. In this case, both of the VWAPs are above the line, right?
okay,
So that tells you that volume traded above it, and there was very little trading down here. You
okay,
really do want to see them both above it, like a true balloon. This balloon would not come up in pattern recognition, right? Because a true balloon, both volume VWAPs from the side are above the day's average, right? The day's average is right here where my mouse is at 218, right? A true balloon would require that both the left and right VWAP be above that, right? Or very close to it, which is, very rare. But this would be enough for me. Like seeing that it's not just that the VWAP is above it, but the most of the volume that traded during this session, these two sides are proportional to each other, right? Most of it occurred above my breakout point.
okay. So that line is the VWAP line, basically. That's where it's trading above.
Correct. The first and second half VWAP for today.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, I'm a huge fan of that. Ahmed asked in the question section, if anyone has questions, pop them in the Q&A part. I will get to them. But Ahmed asked if we do level 2. We do not currently have level 2 data. We are definitely planning to add level 2 data in the near future, but we don't have it today. D asked if there's any fundamental ratios, PE, EV, EBITDA available to consult quickly. The answer is, as far as fundamental data goes, not yet, but we're literally working on it right now. We bought the data, we have access to it. We just haven't interfaced it into the platform and figured out how to make it look. But that is coming, and that's something that a lot of people commonly ask for. BK says hello back to you. And then in the chat, Robbie asked, will TrendSpider offer the ability to view multiple charts at the same time with different tickers? The short answer is yes. You guys have beat us down on that. We had this philosophy when we built this thing that you shouldn't have to look at a ton of charts, right? Like you should be able to work on one chart and move on to the next one, right? And we built the system that way. That has literally been the most common request we've ever had, right? So we are building a multi-chart workspace that will become available. I don't know exactly when, but I know it is queued up, and the dev people are going to start working on that, pretty soon. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay. Thomas asks, do you have an algorithm that alerts when arrows green or red for buy and sell points? Peppy asked that question. There's no algorithm, but there's a way to develop your own. I didn't touch on this during the presentation. I actually honestly Honestly, I think it's a great question. I forgot to mention it, but we do have built-in backtesting capability that's really robust. I have this backtest built in here right now. I was playing with this a while ago, right? It's just a simple 821 EMA cross, right? And you can tell TrendSpider to look at a chart, any chart, and to tell you what would have happened if you traded that way. And you can add in all kinds of other conditions like trailing stops, stop losses, take profits, a time-based condition, or additional technical criteria. And then you can actually plot it on your chart, right? And what it'll do is it'll then show you if you traded this strategy, here's when you would have bought, when you would have sold, how it would have worked out. If you have multiple conditions, it'll tell you why. And then also you'll notice that we enter a new condition that is not closed at the end of this trade, right? There was a 821 EMA cross here on April 19th. So based on how all the past trades in this strategy, right, played out, there were 77 total trades over 7,000 candles. It'll project forward how they all performed, so you have some idea as if it's currently, matching past performance or not. And you can see in this case, it's actually exceeding it a little bit, right? If you would have bought NVAX on an 821 cross here, you'd be doing better than you would have, in past 821 crosses. So it's not really an algorithm to tell you, when to buy and sell, but it's a way for you to design your own, right? To explore and experiment and come up with strategies that might work. And what's really cool is as I flip through my charts, I'm just clicking on symbols in my watch list. It's going to do anything I tell it to do, right? Detect auto trends, detect patterns, right? Detect fibs. It's going to do all that stuff. But because the backtester is open as well, it's going to also calculate a backtest, right? So once I come up with a strategy that I think is useful and I think might work, right? Like this one seems to be playing out really well. This very simple 821 EMA cross thing, right? I can then test it on different symbols by just flipping through them. And additionally, there's a lot of depth to these charts, right? So like this chart gives you your cumulative performance in blue, right? That's the results of the buying and selling in this trading strategy. It gives you the buy and hold performance of the underlying asset up here, and it colors that buy and hold performance based on whether you're in a trade or not. Right, so if I just bring this in a little bit, you can see I was caught this part, right? I was green, I was long, and I made money here. I got long here, but I got stopped out down here, right? I got long here and chopped around a bit. I got green, made some money. You can actually visually see how you performed. You can also plot your drawdown at the bottom here. And not only that, but you can download a list of every one of the trades. There's 76 trades on this name with this strategy to Excel. If you want to play with it, you can see it on the chart. You can remove it from your chart. You can trade short or long only. You can even control the time or the candle that you enter on, right? You buy the high, the low, the next open, right? There's a lot of flexibility in this, right? And it's designed to help you find strategies, right? We don't, we're not like a stock picking service, right? We don't do algorithms for other people. We build tools to kind of let you do your own thing, because we know that traders who follow others blindly, right, and just follow signals tend to underperform the ones who develop, an edge of their own, right? So that's what TrendSpider is all about, is helping you find your edge.
And I actually was going to say that before you even said it. You don't want a platform that has something already designed. If that's what you're looking for, that would be more so, an alert. You should actually be back testing various strategies so that you can actually learn a lot better, and maybe you'll come up with something better, right? Like always think of yourself as being better than the algo. Why can't you back test something to try figuring out, different various strategies and what works better for you, and for maybe even for your own style of trading, whether you're a swing trader or a day trader, or, if you trade short, long, doesn't matter. I think that's more valuable and will give you exactly what Dan said, a much bigger edge in trading than just kind of relying something on that's pre-built. And I find that really interesting because I have a strategy that I use. I always use those gap opens and the back test of the previous day. So I would actually be curious to test that myself later sometime this week. If that's an option for me to do that in there, like back test the previous day's highs or close. That's kind of how I trade, but
you definitely can. There's an indicator in TrendSpider. I'm trying to remember what. Oops, that's not indicators. This is indicators. But if you search for range, right, there's previous session range, which is yesterday's range, today's opening range, and a number of other indicators that cover range, and you can use those in your back tests.
Awesome.
Right, and you can use them in your alerts too. Like you can add range to your chart, it'll put it on here, right? And then you can say, hey, alert me when price breaks through the bottom range or the top range, right? And of course, all of that is customizable.
That's so helpful because this is literally, that's my own strategy for trading. That's how I trade.
Very cool. So let's see, do we have any other questions that anybody has? Thomas asked, is TrendSpider a charting program or a brokerage where you can place trades? TrendSpider is a platform. We're not a broker. You cannot place orders from within the system. It does just about everything else except for execution. We will be partnering with brokers. I'm not sure we're ever going to become a broker of our own. We've definitely talked about it, but that's a whole thing. But what we'll most likely do is allow you to connect your broker into TrendSpider and then facilitate trading from within the platform. And that's been our vision since the beginning, is to give people a way to execute. Because imagine what you could do if you could automate this, right? If you can say, you know what, this 821 cross works really well, right? I've back tested it. It works great on the symbol. It's reliable. I want to have the system automatically place an order on my behalf through my broker when that happens, right? And then I want the system to automatically monitor my exit conditions and get out when any of those hit, right? And be able to predetermine the entire thing ahead of time, right? And this is going back to what I was saying when I first got on here, right? Hedge funds and prop trading desks already do this. There's very little in the moment discretion occurring at any professional trading outfit. They're mostly developing algorithms, back testing them, and then pressing play, and then letting them do their things, right? Letting them, if they determine that MACD crosses coupled with, weird, insider trading data is a positive signal, they just program it in and then they let that run. And then they measure the performance. That type of discipline does not exist in retail for the most part. Most retail traders are watching their charts all day long, glued to them, right? That makes them emotional. They don't stick to a plan, right? So, our goal is to bring that technology to you guys, right? It's taken 3 years to get to where we are here. So I don't pretend that it's going to be super fast, right? But we will get to it, and it'll be really cool when we do.
Well, you should give yourself a lot more credit than that, because even for 3 years, this is a fantastic platform.
Thank you.
A lot of great things that I never even knew existed in here, especially this back test. I'm like blown away by that, and the seasonality, because those are two of my biggest, those are two of the biggest things I use for my own personal trading. So really, really cool.
Definitely. I'm happy to take the time to show you guys that. If anyone else has questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, very grateful for the people who attended.
I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys attending too. Little, not very last minute, but kind of posted that link a little late for you guys. Sorry about that.
Well, I'll make sure to send you the recording once it comes out.
Awesome.
And Izzy, I think you have a coupon. Do you want to share that, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I think I do. I don't know if it's still valid in here, but I believe, I'm pretty sure I did have one. It might be, let me see here.
I think it's IZ25.
I think so. I think it's right here, and I've got a link. It's IZ25.
Okay, so if anyone does want to try TrendSpider, Izzy's code will get you 25% off your first year on any plan, including monthly plans. Just keep in mind, that code is IZ25, and we do one-on-one trainings for customers. So when you get into TrendSpider, it's natural and normal to feel a little overwhelmed. There are almost 7 million lines of code in this platform. There are hundreds and hundreds of features. Many of them are not, obvious, right? Like you end up playing around if you're like, oh, wow, I can automatically anchor volume profile, right? We need to do a better job of promoting some of those capabilities, but you'll find stuff, and if you feel overwhelmed, you can click on your name on the top right corner. It won't show up for me, but for you it will. It'll have a scheduled training option. And you get one-on-one full hour, and you can schedule as many of them as you want. And we'll teach you how to use the product. We know there's a learning curve. And I hope you guys enjoyed this and decide to give it a shot and, continue to kind of support our work and help us make this even better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. I just tweeted that link out for you guys with that coupon code and the affiliation link for anyone that's interested in TrendSpider. I'm actually quite excited to do some back testing myself. So thank you
It's
so
fun.
much.
Definitely. All right. Well, thank you again, Izzy, for putting this together, and I'm happy we made it work.
Thank you for having me.
I guess I'll stop the recording now.
All right, perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay.